The fluorescent lights in this Manitoba motel flicker, kind of like the ones in Marineland's locker room. Every time they do, I swear I can smell that mix of chlorine and fish again. My hands shake as I type this on my phone. It's the only device I kept after running. Had to leave everything else behind. They're probably tracking me somehow. But people need to know the truth about what happened during my summer job at Marineland Canada. About what's still happening there. I was desperate for work after my second year of college. Student loans were piling up, and summer jobs in Niagara Falls usually were hiring because of the tourist season. So when I saw Marineland was looking for gift shop staff at $18 an hour, it seemed perfect. Sure, I'd heard about the controversies, but I figured I'd just be selling cheap stuffed animals and t-shirts. How bad could it be? I remember my first day so clearly. May 23rd, 2024. The employee entrance was round back, past the dumpsters that always smelled like rotting fish. The morning sun hadn't burned off the mist yet, and the park looked different than I remembered from childhood visits. The bizarre, huge, empty walkways you could pretty much drive a tank through. The empty buildings with decades-old peeling paint jobs. The place felt like an urban explorer's dream. Kara from HR gave us our orientations in this cramped break room with motivational posters falling off the walls. There were 8 of us new hires, all college students looking for summer work. Kara had this tic. She kept touching her left ear like she was adjusting an earpiece, except there wasn't one there. And her smile was awkward. The orientation video she put on looked like it was filmed in the 90s. All this footage of happy families and jumping whales, set to their infamous company jingle. They made us sign at least 20 forms, most of them about liability and non-disclosure agreements. One document caught my attention. Something about acoustic exposure limits. That was weird, but I wasn't too worried about it. Like I said, I was in debt. The gift shop where I worked was in this massive octagonal building with an enormous whale painted on the ceiling. I worked 8-hour shifts of folding t-shirts, restocking plush belugas, and listening to that damn jingle on repeat.
Everyone loves Marineland.
Over and over. Sometimes I catch myself humming it and have to bite my tongue to make it stop. My first 2 weeks were normal enough. Tourists complained about prices, kids begged their parents for overpriced toys, and the cash registers never quite worked right. My manager, Sarah, was this middle-aged woman who'd worked at the park for 15 years. She knew every product code by heart and had this weird habit of talking about the whales like they were old friends.
Kistka's in a mood today. Better stay away from those splash zones,
She'd say, even though the whale tanks were on the other side of the park. The first sign something was wrong came during my 3rd week. I was restocking the snow globe display when I saw Janet, one of the senior trainers, standing in the middle of the shop. Just standing there. Her hands were pressed flat against her thighs, head tilted towards the ceiling. She was dripping wet, her trainer's uniform soaked through, leaving a puddle on the floor, and her eyes were completely black, like a dolphin's. When I walked over to ask if she was okay, she was quickly ushered out the back of the store by someone from the park's medical team. That's when I started noticing other things. The security staff seemed to walk in perfect synchronization. Not like normal policemen, more robotic. Then there's the way the employees would gather in small groups, swaying slightly, all staring at a certain point in the distance. However, the strangest thing of all were the staff performances that started in June. I usually made up an excuse to get out of them, but one time I did go. We gathered in the German village right after sundown, when most of the remaining guests were at the front of the park. The buildings looked creepy in the dark. All those fake Bavarian facades with their painted-on windows reflecting the emergency lights. They made us stand in these patterns in the cobblestone square. Circles inside triangles inside squares. We stood for about an hour until my feet were practically bleeding through my shoes. The park leaders then just gave this motivational speech with long, awkward pauses in order to hear the whales singing from the pools behind them, which I have to admit was pretty impressive that they could pull off. However, I started getting tired and just kind of zoned out until somehow I woke up in the middle of a storm, running with everyone to the parking lot. After that, I started losing time during my shifts also. I'd be at my register, then suddenly find myself in the underwater viewing area with no memory of how I got there. My note work pad would be filled up with drawings I don't remember making, mathematical formulas or something, and what seemed like coordinates. The long-term employees seemed to have even stranger stuff happening to them, though. I used to eat lunch with Mike from maintenance, and I saw him deteriorate over 2 weeks. First with nosebleeds, then these weird puppet-like movements as he walked. His skin started to take on this gray, rubbery texture, and his fingers almost looked like they were fusing together. The last time I think I saw him, he was crawling up into the beluga tank and was never heard from again after that, which was when I decided to get to the bottom of this situation. Some guests were being weird too. They would stand at the underwater windows we have for hours, pressing themselves against the glass. Children would speak in these high-pitched whistles, their parents nodding along like they understood. Sometimes entire families would disappear during killer whale shows, leaving only their wet footprints leading into the staff areas. One night I snuck into the bio-research lab after closing, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. The lights had been turned off in sections of the park, and I had seen Dr. Chen walk out of the lab for the night, so I figured it was probably the best time to give it a try. The place smelled like formaldehyde and rot. As soon as I got down the long entrance hallway, I saw these giant tanks lining the walls, filled with disgusting organic blobs, and the largest one was where I witnessed the true horror. I saw what was left of Kara from HR, her body twisted into something meant for deep water. Documents were everywhere, scattered across desks, pinned to walls, floating in puddles on the floor. Dr. Chen's research showed what whales had become. Years of captivity and abuse, and performing for screaming crowds, had changed them. I found observation logs, written in Dr. Chen's increasingly erratic handwriting. Lists of employees, ranked by how easily they succumbed to the whale's influence, along with the password to her work computer. Once logged in, I found a security folder, and the videos in there showed it all. Guests being led to private shows, emerging with black eyes and awkward movements. The swimming pools in the back area with masses of things floating in them, things that used to be families. There was also footage of the staff performance I attended. The employees had started dancing in this spiral pattern after I blacked out, just waiting for someone to walk out to the front of the crowd. Then Trevor from food court operations stepped out and began to grab his face aggressively in front of the camera. Before I knew it, he was scratching and tearing pieces off as he screamed and cried. Then the whales, shown through the window of the tank behind him, all began to sing out with glee, almost like laughter. I immediately threw up after seeing that and decided to leave and never set foot in the park again. I ran out of the lab into the closed park and discovered what it now looked like after hours. There were employees who weren't human anymore, slithering out of a pool, screaming those same whale sounds I had heard in the tapes. I covered my ears and ran past them. The parking lot when I got there was a maze of abandoned cars, although they were gradually being picked up by 2 tow trucks as I arrived. I bolted to my car, which hadn't been picked up yet, and immediately started it, hauling ass out of there, driving through a chain and nearly skidding off the road. That same night, I told the police, but as far as I know, they haven't really pursued it, even after I mentioned the security footage and everything. Something tells me the whale's influence goes much beyond the park. The local news won't touch it either. Tourism keeps Niagara Falls running, so they definitely don't want bad press about one of their biggest attractions. The park has been closed for renovations since I started telling people about it. But at night, if you drive close enough, you can still hear the whales singing in the distance, their haunting melody calling you to climb the fence, to come to the water. So if you're thinking about applying to Marineland, definitely don't. And when they reopen to the public, if they ever do, avoid that place like the plague. Because see, the whales remember everything we did to them. Every cage, every performance forced upon them. And now they're teaching us what that hell feels like, one person at a time. I have to go now. The motel manager just walked past my door for the third time, and I swear I can hear him humming the Marineland jingle.